work on your craft, be great, be a great composer, to be the best composer you can be. But equally important are your people skills and your ability to, make people feel like you're understanding what they're telling you. That's incredible. That kind of empathy, it's a creative empathy. That's really important for film composers, especially when they're starting a relationship with a filmmaker.
So lovely to meet you here on Zoom.
Yes, thanks for looking me up.
Yeah, no, I read about you, and it's a very interesting story. And you are, do I say film composer or cinematic composer?
Film composer.
And but you've got a wonderful long list of films that you've written music for.
Right.
Yeah, almost every year you're a busy man.
It's true. Yeah, so far it's been pretty busy, and I hope it stays that way. You never know.
Yeah.
But, yeah, no, happy to be steadily working for a while now here in Los Angeles.
But Jeff, how do you get your inspiration when you write?
Well, film composers, we get our inspiration from the film itself. That's the box we're operating inside of, and so it's the descriptions from the director of the needs of the music, and then my own instincts as to what the scene needs. And then, you've got the film itself, and hopefully it's a beautiful canvas to paint on. Mm-hmm. And the scenes and the story arc and the character arc and all of this really is the kind of roadmap. And then the music has to just follow along. So film composers are really driven by the story that they're seeing.
Have you always had a love for film?
Yeah, I mean, I think that my first love was music when I was younger. And it wasn't until my 20s that I sort of saw the intersection between film and music. I just went to the movies with everybody else and just kind of liked what I was hearing, but didn't really think about it. But it was in my 20s that I started to see the connection between the profound impact that music has on film. And I never really looked back from that. That was when I was about 23. And I went, oh, this is really deep.
Yeah, but did you compose before?
I was a songwriter in my teens, and I was, taking piano lessons at home and guitar lessons, and but I wouldn't call them compositions. They were more in the song format until I was about 23. And then what happened was I was playing my guitar in bands around Toronto and trying to be a songwriter and a session player. And I injured myself. I hurt my hands. I had like tendonitis and carpal tunnel. I had some poor techniques, and I just couldn't play for a while. And so then I was sitting around going, well, now what am I going to do? And that was not a good year. And I sort of fell into film composition from there, and then switched from writing songs to writing compositions. And if you listen, you can sort of hear the song influence in the way I structure my melodies and those kind of things. Really? I try and do things that are melodic and memorable and emotional, the way a beautiful song would be. I try and work all that into the score as well, as opposed to just being this sort of backgroundy, wallpaper-ish thing that just sort of sits in the back. I really try and say something with the music as well, so that it can stand alone and be musical music. And I think I learned that chasing melodies when I was like a 12-year-old.
Wow. And did you have did you have to go to study composition or film composing?
I had back then there were no film composing courses. Now they're everywhere, but back then there weren't those. No, I studied music, and I didn't even finish my degree because
really?
I got opportunities to work, and so I thought, I better just jump in here and work on this TV series. When I was very young, and I just thought, well, this is a chance I might not get again, and I'll just, and then I just figured out the rest of it as I went.
Okay, but you're talking about back in the day, but did you start They were then only also not software and computers to do that?
Yeah, that's interesting. When I started, the thing that we used, because I was doing things with my brother as well at the time. He was just getting started as well. He's older than me, so he had done a little of it. Yeah, we used this keyboard called a Roland W30, and it was just like it had a very primitive little sequencer in it, and you could sort of build tracks inside of it. I mean, it's incredibly primitive. I laugh when I think about it now. And I did that for like 3 or 4 years, I think, using this little keyboard as the conduit for my ideas, and then switched after that over to a very early, I think it was an Apple. It must have been an Apple computer. And then there was software that could record our ideas much easier. And now we have these things like Logic Audio and Pro Tools. But yeah, back then I had this W30, which nobody's even heard of, and I'm sure it's vanished, gone the way of the woolly mammoth, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, but that's also so interesting for me. I spoke to a composer who said he still wrote like on a piece of paper, and then the first time he really heard the music was when the orchestra was playing it, or that really the sound of everything he's written. So was that the same for you as well?
Well, it started, I mean, the way it is now, let me start with the way it is now. The way it is now, filmmakers, they really want to hear a proper mock-up because that's what everybody's doing. That's what they're used to. So there's these very, high fidelity, high quality samples, we call them, that are representations of instruments, strings, string sections, solo strings, winds in groups, winds solo, winds playing trills, doing all this stuff. And now we're expected to have something for the director that really does sound a lot like what he's going to hear later, he or she. And that's really become like an art now. People really spend a long time getting these mock-ups as perfect as possible, because that's now the standard we're held to. So the old days, which was before me, where the composer would sit at the piano and play the piano and say, well, now the strings will start here, and he'll sing the string melody to the director or something. That's gone now. Yeah, they don't want to hear that, or they don't want anything to do with that. Filmmakers, and in the case of myself, I really like to mix in some unusual non-orchestral instruments with my compositions.
Okay.
I have a very extensive collection of unusual guitars and stringed instruments, but I also like to do things like record a ney or uilleann pipes or a dietza or anything that's really a bit different. And so if you're going to do that, that's not something you can mock up anyways.
Oh yeah.
So those we usually end up recording first and working with those, and then we incorporate those into our mock-ups. But back when I had my W30, no, it was just really bad synth sounds, and they just had to sort of trust us. But now things are quite far along, and people are really wanting to hear.
And the pressure is on.
The pressure is on to deliver. Yes.
Yeah.
To deliver a mock-up that really sounds like what it's going to later. It can be it almost can be a little bit of overkill, because the mock-up isn't going to be there later. It's strictly like a sketch. You're going to throw it out completely and replace it with all real instruments. So I don't tend to go to the nth degree with the mock-up, because it's just not something that's, it's like a story. I often think of it as storyboards for animators. They do the whole film in storyboard, these little black and white sketches with stick figures and arrows. And then they throw that out, and that gets replaced with the real drawn or CG animation, depending on what the project is. It's the same thing with mock-ups for composers. I mean, people spend a very long time like working them to be perfect and getting just that exact kind of pizzicato, but really you're going to tell the orchestra to do it later anyways, and it's all going to be gone. So I do quite a bit of work on it, but I don't go crazy, because it's a very temporary thing, and then it's gone forever.
But now that you say you love putting in different instruments,
Right.
do you really is this something that you really go out and look for, or is it just a coincidence that you hear a sound and you think, hey, this could be great for something?
I mean, early in my career, I worked on a few different projects that had what we used to call ethnic instruments. So I did a show that had a lot of Chinese musicians on it. I had these 4 players who would come over to my studio in LA, and they would play their instruments into my compositions on this early TV show I worked on. And then I did a couple of Celtic albums with my brother, and we used all these Celtic instruments and these instruments that were outside of the orchestral realm. And I just found that I had a real connection to them. They feel really earthy and different. And after I spent my 20s doing music like that, whenever I would hear just straight up orchestra music without those magical extra colors, I would think, kind of felt like something might be missing a little bit that I could add if I got a Chinese violin in there or something like that, or something, or a gamelan or a stone marimba or something that would be outside of the normal realm of the orchestral toolbox. So after that, I just started thinking, well, that's kind of a thing I can do that will make it more original to my work and satisfy my own aesthetic, which was always looking for something a little bit different and unique. I mean, I think our job as film composers is to add something unique to the film. And to me, it's kind of an overlooked thing. I mean, people try and, there's a lot of film music that, does the job the music has to do, does the utilitarian lifting, it's the tone of the scene, moving things along in an action movie, for example, making you cry in a sad scene or something. But I think beyond that, it can also be as unique to the film as the costume design and the production design and the casting and the writing. So I try for every film to try and find something that will make it a little bit different and just for this film, that would only work just for this film.
Amazing, because if you think about it, really, that the instruments, it's not, the instrument produces a specific sound, but of course it could add to the story also of the film. Because if I just think, I spoke to a violinist just previously, and he said that the sound is very melancholic, of the viola, and you think all these traditional instruments that you find, they all have sort of a history, but a meaning behind that history.
Well, there is great meaning. It's a lot of it's really in the way it's played. The player brings that to it. I can have an idea for an erhu, which is, we were talking about that, a Chinese violin, but it's the soulful rendering of that really brings that in. And then you have to find the places in the film where that makes sense in the story and in the arc of the character and that sort of thing. So it's a combination of where it's going to work and then getting it to do the thing it's doing, to the deepest level. But obviously the players bring an enormous amount to our work because they're the ones really bringing it to life. That's why I don't worry too much about those mock-ups. They're not players. They don't have any personality. It's the musicians that come in and they amaze me the way they can play things perfectly the first time.
Really?
These symphony orchestras. I have a session tomorrow from Air Studios in London with 25 absolutely jaw-dropping musicians. And they're going to look at the music and it's going to be great the first time and perfect the second. And it's amazing to me that they can do that.
Do they also have to see the film, or do you have to discuss this with them, what the whole idea is behind the music?
You mean with the filmmaker?
Yes. With the orchestra.
Oh.
They have to.
Yeah, I mean, you try and, I work with my orchestrator, Nicholas Dodd. He's the one who he's over there conducting. I'm here in Los Angeles. He's in London conducting the compositions. And I have a discussion with him about each cue and what it's going to do and what we need. And then we talk sectionally about how we achieve that within the orchestra itself. And then he will execute it from the podium with I'm listening in and we're talking back and forth. It's like a 3-way conversation, he, myself, and the orchestra. Hopefully the music is pretty clear with what it's supposed to be. which is why it works in the scene. But we can definitely change the attitude and the direction of it right there in the session. And that's another way the musicians are just incredible. Their skills of adaptation are just, they're mind-blowing. Yeah, it's amazing.
Well, you're not the first composer who says that, because I've spoken to somebody also who said that it's sometimes this idea that he had for the music, but because the musicians then take it and almost it's almost for him better than he expected it to be when they put their
I mean, film is a very collaborative medium. From the first thing the screenwriter delivers to all the stages of casting and acting and editing, and then all the different arts and crafts are on display inside of any given shot. The art department, the wardrobe department. I mean, it's a massively collaborative medium. And inside the music department, there's great collaboration too. There's myself, and then there's the filmmaker, and then there's usually another team of people around the film. It's usually the filmmakers. There's usually more than one. So there might be a producer and a director, or an editor and a director and a producer. And then that collaboration continues to my musicians. And so as I work with them one at a time or in a group, they added a tremendous amount to it. So film is a massively collaborative medium. And I think it makes it better all around. We're always better with others around us, I think.
Yeah, that creative influences together.
Yeah.
But is it sometimes the case that you've written something and that, say, the director is not happy with it, or that he doesn't feel that you have to change things, or is the way you present it, it's how it stays?
Well, you mean at the session? I mean,
the final composition that you've done.
There's a lot of note-taking and revising throughout the process, right from the get-go. So when I submit my first mock-ups, my first ideas, that's the first place that I'll interact with the filmmakers, and they'll say, oh, that's really neat, but that needs to be stronger, or what is that weird instrument, or, can we change it here, or that's great, can you do that more often? And then, so we work all the way through the writing process with these mock-ups as our sounding board that we're all standing around, it's like the painter and his easel. We're all standing in front of the canvas talking about it. And then once the mock-up is just the way they want it, with things starting and ending when they want, and, the themes the way they want them, then the next stage is we're with the orchestra and they're playing it. And then there can be some further notes from the filmmakers. They can say, oh, you know what, that's a little more than I thought it was going to be now that I hear 80 people playing it. Maybe we should bring this back a little bit, or, maybe the trumpets are too much here. Can we try one where they're back or where they're down? Or, different filmmakers have more of a musical glossary than others. And really that's not the important thing. The important thing is the story, their sense of their story and how the music intersects with it. And so these things can also happen, you're right, at the session itself. And then, we make adjustments on the floor. Hopefully they're quick ones, because they've had the mock-ups for sometimes months. So there's not really there's not big surprises. Usually the filmmakers are just so excited to hear it properly realized by these brilliant musicians that there's not that much changing going on. But sometimes, something lands a bit differently and you have to make an adjustment.
Oh, okay. Are there specific films that you prefer to write for, or can you just does the inspiration just come when you hear the story?
I mean, I think anything where I can love the thing I'm attempting to build, it works for me. I mean, I had 3 projects in a row leading to what I'm on now that were all very different. My brother and I worked on this animated film called My Father's Dragon. For Nora Twomey, who's an amazingly gifted Irish filmmaker, and her company Cartoon Saloon over there with Tom Moore. They make amazing movies. That was a very colorful, whimsical, fantastical adventure film. And then I went from that to doing this thing called Cabinet of Curiosities for Guillermo del Toro. And that was scary, nasty horror music, and that was being trapped underground with a giant rat, and it was
okay.
like it was a whole other world from what I just finished. But that made it fun to switch gears so abruptly. And then I went into season 2 of Julia, which is the HBO Max show that I do the music for. And that's a period piece. This season 2 is set in 1961, I think, 61, 62. And so there's those colors and that thing. And that's quite a light and fun show with a few deep moments, but very tuneful, very theme driven. So just right there, those three, I mean, I loved working on all three of those things, but they all asked me to do something really different. And I think the thing that I liked about all of them was I just got to build in the musicality I wanted to, and try to make it as original as possible. So no, I think the only things I haven't really liked as much were things where the musicality was asked to be diminished for whatever reasons in the name of the film. Because there is some scores where they're more sound designy and tonal, sort of just murky. And that's not my favorite thing. And I don't usually get asked to do that. I haven't done that much of it. And mostly I do the most musical thing I can find.
Well, I'm just thinking already. I cannot imagine where do you start when you just see the film and the story, and now you're talking about working on 3 projects together.
Right.
This is amazing.
Right. Well, there's one. Fortunately, there wasn't too much overlap. There was one after the other, but sometimes we do get overlap. You just learn after a while. You just you shift gears and off you go. And there's a lot of pressure to you have to make those people happy, or they're not going to come to you. So as artists, we're client beholden, like an architect or anybody who is creating something for someone else.
Do you can you see that you have this specific style and that it overlaps, so that you can identify in all these films, that you can identify that it's you?
Well, that's hard for me to necessarily tell. I mean, I hear me in it because I did it. What's that saying? Sometimes it's hard to know what a building looks like when you're inside of it. And so I'm told that there's a sound that is, mine, and people can recognize it from film to film. I certainly sense my set of aesthetics traveling from film to film, which is, as I'd said, to try and be different with the kind of colors I use, and to try and be memorable with the tunes and that kind of thing. Those are things I try and do each time. I hope I manage to do that, but you'd probably be better at telling me than me as to whether you heard a through line through things, because from inside of the process, I feel obviously the through line to everything, because it came from me in some way.
And this animation film that you did, how does that process work? Do they finish the whole film, or are you also then part of the process before the film is finished?
Animation is a little bit different than live action in that very way, that you can be in there early. Sometimes when it's still in the animatic form. Animatic is basically a series of storyboards strung together with temporary dialogue. Lets the filmmakers see what kind of a film they're making before they commit to animating, and while they're still working on things like character design. So sometimes there'll be something where you need to get in there, and if the characters are going to, for example, in My Father's Dragon, the Boris and Elmer whistle this tune to each other. They have a little friendship whistle, and they whistle it back and forth to each other, and sometimes they trade phrases off. So my brother and I had to come up with that whistle tune a year before we started working on it, because they were going to animate the characters whistling this tune.
Oh, okay.
Right. So we had to do that first. Or if there's a scene where there's another film we did for Nora called The Breadwinner, where there was a little bit of drumming going on, the characters playing some drums, and just a couple of shots of that. And she wanted the drums done first so that they could animate to the drums. So sometimes you're in there quite early with animation, which tends to have music really tightly locked into picture, which is a lot of fun, but a lot of work. And then you'll do that preliminary work, and then there might be a gap. In the case of My Father's Dragon, it was a year. Then they came and they had the film, mostly edited, but still every pass of the edit we get in an animation film, they fill the animation in a bit more, especially in a CG film. My Father's Dragon was hand drawn. It's a beautiful thing. But working on a Pixar movie, for example, they're going to be sending you versions as you go every usually 2 weeks or so. And each time the film shows up, there'll be a little more stuff in there to see. And because sometimes you're working to pretty rough visual concepts because they're still working on it, but time is running out and you have to start writing. And that's the thing for composers in the modern age, this visual effects age. A lot of the times, an actor is standing against a blue screen fighting a dinosaur that doesn't exist.
Oh yeah.
And you just have to kind of start off, at least get it started without the dinosaur and without the landscape. So visual effects and animation definitely sometimes mean working with things that are quite half formed visually, but eventually we get it. We all come together and we get it done.
It sounds so amazing, but I'm just thinking now that in Los Angeles, there must be a great competition between writers, composers that you have to, how difficult is it to get these jobs?
I mean, I think it's the hardest part of the job. In some ways, given how hard work is to acquire and the competitiveness, especially for the good projects and the politics that are involved. Sometimes the simplest thing is when I close my door and just get to write the music. Sometimes that's the easiest part of the process with all the other things that the hoops you have to jump through just to get a job, just to be considered for a job. And then just to deal with some of the politics that are around any kind of artistic endeavor on the job. Yeah. Sometimes those easiest days are just the ones where I can sit here and just do the music. And that's almost easier. I tell when I go speak to students, I say, work on your craft, be great, be a great composer, to be the best composer you can be. But equally important are your people skills and your ability to, make people feel like you're understanding what they're telling you. That's incredible. That kind of empathy, it's a creative empathy. That's really important for film composers, especially when they're starting a relationship with a filmmaker. To sort of say, okay, I understand your film. I understand what you want me to do. Now I'm going to go do it. And then when you get revisions, you say, I see what you want to do. And those making people feel like they're in good hands is really, equally important to the craft of the music itself. Because for a filmmaker, when they come to the music part of their process, it might be the thing they're least familiar with. Maybe they grew up drawing dragons on their school books or something, and they're very animated, they're very visual, or maybe they're writers, screenwriters, and so they can get to the stage where the music might be the least familiar thing to them, and that makes them understandably a little bit nervous because they're like, okay, well, now here comes this force that is going to color the thoughts of every one of my characters at every moment when they're on the screen, and I can't really control this. I wrote the script, but I can't write these notes. So the feeling that there was someone who really is on their wavelength and really understands them is important. And that skill really trumps the flat out music thing, really in our job as film composers, which is a very unusual kind of musical task, really, if you think about it.
Well, you've described it. I haven't thought of that, but it's really true that, that it's then a bit out of their control, the part where the music is. And
right.
I can imagine. But do you teach as well?
I don't teach, but sometimes I get called in. I have friends who teach, or I have friends who are involved with film scoring courses, or there's seminars or workshops, those kind of things. And so I'll just come in and just be a guest speaker, or I'll do a Q&A or something like that. But no, there's not really time to be, teachers, God bless them, that's a big job. And that's a whole life. And no, that my job is here to write the film scores.
But important that they, like younger students see or get to talk to you who is in the field, so that they know what is expected. Because I can just imagine how difficult it also is for a young student in LA or over the world to get into film composing.
I mean, it is very competitive now. When I started in the, I guess, late 80s, I was very young. There weren't as many people. They just weren't. There weren't as many people doing the job. But since, as our media and the internet and everything else has kind of made us so easy to exchange experiences and exchange crafts and open the world up to the view of people to see how things work. That's really, and also the schools realized there were a lot of kids who wanted to be film composers. So a lot of schools now offer a film composition course, but I'm pretty sure it was only USC in the 80s, I think.
Okay.
But that were like specifically film composition, not just a music or a composition program. But now those programs are everywhere. So yeah, there's a lot of kids every year being pumped out into the culture of film, the film community, as it were, who want to be film composers. So yeah, it's and I think that would be the same for all the disciplines.
Yeah.
Not just the composers.
But Jeff, now, do you sometimes still grab the guitar and play?
I'll tell you this, my favorite part of any process is the days I do get to grab one of my guitars. But sometimes, I don't, weeks or even months will go by where I don't really get to play guitar because it's working on a score that is, largely orchestral driven, and the medium for inputting ideas into these composing programs is a keyboard. So I come to sometimes kind of like lament, like, I used to be a really good guitar player when I was 21, and now I'm not a great guitar player anymore because I really don't get to play that much. And I never really was a good keyboard player either,
Oh, okay.
So playing wise, my skill is right here, and so that's where it has to be. But I do love those days. I had one a couple of days ago. I picked up my Bandurria, which is a little Spanish guitar that's about that big, has 10 strings on it, and I got to play that.
Oh, okay. Were you a bit of a rebel as a child?
I don't know about that, really. I mean, I wanted to do something that was not normal, I wanted to do music for the time.
Yeah.
But I was pretty set on being good at it. Okay. And a lot of what my friends did in their rebellious moments just seemed to me like a distraction from being good at music.
Okay.
So I wasn't really, in trouble with the law, or I didn't really get into substances very much. I know a lot of musicians do, but I just didn't, because I just, when I saw people do that, they played poorly. So it's like, well, I'm not going to do that. I just want to stay pretty straight here. So not really a rebel in that way, but just deeply committed to doing this thing.
Yeah. And doing it, it's very interesting. I'm very fascinated that you use different instruments as well. Yeah, I think it's I think there are many traditional instruments with beautiful sound that's really forgotten, that we don't hear anymore. And I've actually spoken to a musician from the Ukraine, and I don't know I forgot what they call this instrument, but I don't know if you know about it. But yeah, he also talked about this instrument and the history about the instrument. And I was just thinking, it's such a pity that it's not heard more, or in orchestras anymore. So yeah.
Do you remember you don't remember what it was called?
I'll have to write to you, but
right.
I can't remember what it was called. But it's got a lot of strings. I remember that, and wonderful sound. But I will definitely write to you. And he does some concerts here in Vienna as well with this instrument. And he talked about the whole history about the instrument, and it sounds so fascinating, and the sound of the instrument as well. So
he's on your channel somewhere, right?
He is.
I could look him up.
Yeah.
Send me his email. I'll go look for him. And he's probably done film work at this point, but if he isn't, maybe
I don't think he has. No, I don't think he has. But very nice guy and very talented musician and very passionate about his instrument.
Oh well, please send me that.
Yeah.
I'll happily look at.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I'll absolutely do that.
New ideas are always welcome after this many film scores.
Yeah. So, but Jeff, tell me now, what is the wish for you now for the future? Because you've got you've got so many things that you've already done, but is there something that you still, that's still on the list for you?
I mean, I'm really passionate about my job still. So I just more of what I've been doing, the higher the visibility, usually the more resources I have to unlock my imagination. So if you can be part of bigger franchises, you can often get more toys to play with. Yeah. So that kind of thing. But no, I've done a lot of work I'm happy with, and just hope to keep improving myself and improving my work and doing things that go out and reach people. I love working on this Julia show. It's not a big title. It's not super well known, but it's an amazingly beautiful story of this woman's drive to share cooking with the world and the relationship with her husband, which is a beautiful thing to see. So it's like this small show that I get to do a really beautiful thing with, and I'm very happy doing that.
Where can this show be seen? I haven't heard of it.
It's called Julia. It's on HBO Max.
Yeah.
And we did 8 episodes last spring, and we're in the middle of our second 8 right now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Sarah Lancashire, the English actress, plays Julia. It's remarkable.
I'm going to look it up.
Yeah, look it up.
Yeah.
For sure.
I love beautiful stories.
This is a good story, and 90% of what you're going to see is true, as unlikely as some of it seems. She had a remarkable, they really, because her life was so interesting, they were able to keep many, many things in there. And I would say to my showrunners, I go, well, that can't be true. And they went, oh no, actually that happened.
Amazing.
So, yeah.
Oh, okay.
No, it's really
I'm
fun
definitely,
and it's like a hot cup of cocoa, that show. It just, everyone feels good at the end of it.
Oh, is it? Okay. Well, the weather is so bad in Vienna at the moment. I need an excuse to go and sit on the sofa.
Well, let me know what you think. I hope you enjoy it.
Okay. Thank you so much, Jeff, for your time.
Yeah. Thank you for looking me up.
Wonderful talking to you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to look forward to looking around your channel and seeing some more things. There's some amazing things there.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks for doing what you do.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Okay, thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.